morning. I'm Pastor Eric. Just glad to be here. I just got to say as well, I think I've been playing with Graham's kids, so I'm sick. And so I can't promise you what might come out of my mouth because I'm all hopped up on cough medicine, and I'm speeding, okay? I feel like I took, like in college during finals, you take Black Beauties, you know? And, right, and I'm talking about Bible college, by the way, as well. So, I didn't even know if I could make the third service with my voice, but we decided to go ahead and do it. Anyway, so as you know, we're in this series called You're Not the Boss of Me, and we've been talking about what comes out of your heart, okay? Because of a statement that Jesus made. He said that everything that comes out of your heart, in your heart is the cradle of your emotions, okay? That's we live out of our heart. That's where you lust, that's where you're angry, that's where you that's where you're jealous, just like that song, where this guy's trying to work through the tension of being jealous about his ex and then just be content. But the reason why we're going to do this is because Jesus said that everything that we do, every action, every word comes out of our heart. So that means that when you have something that's weird, that's uncharacteristic, comes out of your mouth and you go, whoa, where'd that come from? Jesus is like, oh, I know. It came out of your heart. And so the thing is that these things become your boss, these things that are found in our heart, things like guilt and greed and, again, jealousy, or as the Bible puts it, the Bible word for jealousy is envy. I don't think we experience envy as much in our culture until social media. You know what I'm saying? For example, how many of you guys are on Instagram? I don't mean like right now, but you have an Instagram account, okay? I was on Instagram and I started to get fed up with it because the problem with Instagram is I found out that I'm not on vacation enough, I don't live in the right place, my car isn't cool enough, my boat isn't big enough, and my food is definitely not pretty enough. And so I thought, you know what, I was gonna quit Instagram for a while, I was gonna boycott it, no Instagram, right? But then I thought, you know what, I'm not a quitter, okay? In fact, last night, I was sitting down, Darlene walked in the living room, and I was eating a quart of ice cream, and she was like, are you gonna eat that whole quart of ice cream by yourself? And I'm like, well, unless you selfishly want some. But yeah, I'm not a quitter. I threw the lid away when I started it, because I'm gonna eat this whole thing, by God, right? So I decided to do something about this whole Instagram thing, and I decided to up my game so that I could make you discontent with your life by posting filtered, cropped, edited photos that are the highlight reel of my life so that you can look at your life and go, dang, my life sucks. And so I started doing that so that I wanted to make you think that all I do is travel and sail and surf and fish and boat. I wanted you to hate me because you ain't me, So anybody follow me? I've been doing pretty good at that, right? Now here's the problem. There is this Instagram page that I've not been able to get on. Remember that song, All I Want to Do Is Get My Picture on the Cover of the Rolling Stone? I want to get my picture on this Instagram page, and it's called Preachers and Sneakers, okay? And what this guy does, it's a great page to follow. What he does is he documents preachers who wear really expensive shoes. And it's awesome because he'll have like 400 comments, and they're great to follow. I just get a bag of popcorn and just watch and read them because people were like, those shoes, that money for the shoes could have been used to feed the poor. And then other people were like, don't judge the Lord's anointed. And so they're always arguing about it. But I always thought, gosh, I've not arrived until I've been featured on Preachers and Sneakers. But the problem is, look at those shoes, the bottom shoes. One of those pastors, this is a panel, and they're all wearing these shoes. One of them, $1,700 for those shoes. It has the Nike swoosh backwards. Anybody have those? Anybody? Okay. And then there's another one. They're wearing the Adidas Yeezys. That's the one that what's his name? Kanye West. Yeah. Those are the green ones, but the black ones go for $1,000. And I think I saw you sitting here earlier. You have a pair of those on, don't you? Yes. Turn around. Let me see them. Okay, come up, give them to me. I just want to make this website. I just want to make this Instagram page. Come on, bring them up here. Pull your phones out, guys. Here's what you do. I'm going to put these on, and you guys take pictures of me and hashtag and tag Shoreline Church, Pastor Eric, tag Sneakers and Preachers, okay, and Adidas, what are they called? Yeezys, yeah. And then maybe I'll make this page on Preachers and Sneakers. So look, you got the perfect place right here. I'm gonna be like, what's that? No, don't hashtag that. We want them to think that I own these sneakers, and they're gonna put me up there, and there's gonna be a debate about me. We'll probably have protesters out here next week, but it'll increase the attendance of our church, because what do they say? Even bad publicity is good publicity, right? So What is it? Yeah, no such thing as bad publicity. So while I'm preaching, make sure this is the only church that tells you to pull out your phone, make sure you get these pics. Tell me, right there. You got it? All right, so it's awesome, isn't it? Now, today we're not talking about this boss, envy. We're going to talk about his cousin, greed. And today's boss is very sensitive but appropriate topic because whenever you talk about your heart and your possession, it really comes down to the two things. It comes down to either generosity or greed. And because all of us, given the chance to weigh in on this topic, we'd all say, listen, I could be more generous, but I'm not a greedy person. I mean, yeah, we could all be more generous, but I wouldn't say I'm greedy. And that's the issue with greed. It can be very difficult to identify because just like jealousy, because listen, jealousy is very difficult to identify in the mirror because no one will admit to being jealous. I mean, that's something you deal with when you're a teenager, right? Or when you're 8. Well, he got more than me. You go, well, just grow up, right? I mean, I'll admit that I have an issue with anger, or I'll admit that I deal with guilt, or I deal with lust. Well, I won't admit that. I'll deal with anger or something like that. But to say that my problem is that I'm jealous, everyone would say, you just need to grow up, man, right? But greed is also good at disguising itself because greed, I got a cough drop in my mouth, hold on, can sometimes be seen as a virtue. It can be seen as a virtue. Well, I'm not greedy. I'm just very careful at what I spend. I'm just a good saver. I wouldn't call myself greedy. I just want to be a good steward of what God has brought me. So it's easy for greed easy like my shoes, to disguise itself. Isn't it ironic that I'm talking about greed and I'm wearing a $1,000 pair of shoes? $1,000. If I had a pair of shoes for $1,000, I wouldn't even walk on the concrete. I would be like, I'm only wearing them indoors on carpet. Wouldn't you do that, right? Yeah. Anyway, many of these bosses, they want to just control our heart. So greed is very difficult to see in the mirror and the other thing is when most people think of greed, here's what we think of. We think of Scrooge sitting at his table with bags of money, right? And starving people are outside the window. But we're going to discover today there's actually different types of greed, okay? And the greed that we're going to look at today is not really like that. The other thing about greed is he's very sensitive. You start talking about greed, and greed gets upset, and greed gets offended. And that's why some of you are thinking, I wish that I didn't come here today because I don't want to talk about this. But see, you have to tread lightly, but I'm going to hit it hard today because with greed, you have to hit it hard. Because here's what we're going to discover, is that there are different types of greed, and when greed becomes your boss, it becomes the filter for almost every financial decision that you make, and it doesn't stop with finances. It bleeds into even your relationships. So because greed is so good at disguising itself, it can be next to impossible to deal with. So what I want to do is I want to start out reading a scripture that is in the passage in the book of Luke, all right, in which Jesus defines this type of greed that's going to set us up for our discussion. Now, let me just say, if you're not a church person and you're thinking, great, this is why I don't go to church. Every time I go to church, they talk about money. And if that happens to you, because I know that's happened to people, they're like, every time I go to church, they talk about money. They think that all churches do is talk about money, or it could be that God really wants to deal with you about this. But let me just tell you, it's not a financial issue. This is a heart issue. And we say this all the time. You don't have to believe what we believe to come here, because the principles that we're going to talk about today can change your life, can direct your life, even if you don't believe in God. In fact, there are philanthropists that do a lot of good in the world that don't believe in God or follow God, but yet they apply the principles that we're looking at today, and you can see it works, okay? So we're going to look at some practical principles that will help you get rid of the boss of greed in your heart. But first, you have to recognize that you have an issue with it, which most people wouldn't. Most people would say, I'm not greedy, okay? Yes, I could be more generous. Well, let's look at this type of greed. Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And again, when we think of greed, we think of the Scrooge thing. And so in our mind, we go, that's not me. I'm not a greedy person. My heart goes out for those who are in need. I wrote a check for people during hurricane, needed relief for Hurricane Dorian. But Jesus says there's different types of greed. See what he said? Watch out on your guard against all kinds of greed, not just the Scrooge kind. And here he describes a specific kind of greed. He says, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So basically what he's saying is there is a kind of greed where you live your life as if the quality of life is equal to the acquisition of stuff. There's a type of greed where the quality of your life is directly proportionate to the stuff that you possess. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a boss that was never satisfied with your work? Anybody? That's just me? Have you ever had a boss where no matter what you did, he never gave you accolades, he never gave you encouragement, or she never gave you encouragement. It was always like what you're doing wrong, never satisfied. That's the way the boss of greed is. The boss of greed is never satisfied. People who are controlled by greed, if they don't shop, they will actually literally die. Okay, that went over really well. Okay. There's a culture, you may not be aware of this culture, but there is a culture that has so much stuff that as they get more, the more stuff they get, they just build more spaces for them. Like in this culture, they started out with closets that were normal, that you just opened doors. But pretty soon they had so many clothes and so many shoes, they had to have closets that you started to walk into. Then they started to have closets for each of the husband and the wife to walk into. But then the closets got bigger, but then there wasn't enough room there, so they started moving some of their things into their garage or their attic or their basement if you have a basement. But then it became so full that they started building these buildings that we have some right across the way here that are basically just nothing but garages. You just roll up the door and you just put stuff in them and you rent it by the month. And it's stuff that doesn't fit in your house, so you just now have another place that you rent just for stuff that you don't use. You ever heard of that? I'm trying to make it sound funny because if you looked at it from another culture, it would actually sound pretty ridiculous, right? That we actually have so much stuff that we rent more places just to store the stuff. Jesus says it's a type of greed where the quality of life is equal to the acquisition of more stuff. I need to have the latest. I need to upgrade to the best. And we live a life where we're just adding and adding to the collection of stuff. Then what happens is we go to church or we get an email or a phone call or a letter asking for a $500 donation. And what do? We look in our wallet, we look at our checkbook, we look at our bank account, and we go, I don't have $500. I could do 100. But meanwhile, we spend endless amount of time being creative on how we can figure out how we can finance the next toy, or how I can upgrade my lifestyle, or how can I swing the new iPhone 11. We'll even wait in line to be one of the first people to have the iPhone 11 and go, it's just the iPhone 11. Oh, right? And then when someone wants we'll actually be walking out of the Apple store and someone wants a donation and we'll go, oh, sorry, I don't have any cash. Meanwhile, God says, that doesn't stop you from buying anything. That doesn't stop you from spending. That doesn't stop you from getting that dress that's on sale. Or that doesn't stop you from upgrading to the latest gadget. You don't look at your checkbook and go, well, I guess I can't swing that. Jesus says that's greed. Living your life as if the acquisition of things is equal to the quality of life. And he says to be on guard against that. That when you live your life, if you live your life, I've got to have the latest and the greatest. Because I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time when you kept your television until it just didn't work. And then you took it to this place called the TV repairman. They don't have when was the last time you saw a TV repair place? What do? It doesn't work anymore. Oh, I can get a bigger one now. And not just bigger, but now it has to be thinner too, right? We upgrade to the latest and the greatest. Jesus says, if you don't watch it, that's going to become your boss. When your kids feel like your stuff is more important than them, that's greed. Now that you're feeling good about yourself, I talk about this all the time. I'm not exempt to these kind of talks, okay? And for years, I've stood up on this stage and I've talked about having margin. I've talked in our finances that your lifestyle, your salary, your lifestyle shouldn't chase your salary, that you need to have a margin between your lifestyle and your salary. I've talked about how you should be trying to get out of debt. And I've talked to you about how it frustrates me because I'm supposed to stand up here and tell you this, but I'm in debt. And I don't have a lot of margin. The house that we lived in for 15 years, it was a house we could afford, but it was at the very top of our affordability to where there wasn't much margin. And then one year, our whole air conditioning had to be replaced $5,000. And we didn't have the margin, we didn't have the money, we didn't have an emergency fund. So guess where that went? On a credit card. And before you know it, you have lots of debt. And then I have to get up here and talk to you about having margin and not being in debt, because when you're in debt, you're a slave to the one you borrow from. So the way to justify it, I would say things, you can't be a Christ follower and not actively be trying to get out of debt. And we would be trying to get out of debt. But when you don't have margin between what you make and what your lifestyle is, when there's no margin right there, it's hard to do. Now, there's a family in our church who they started attending a couple years ago, and I started spending time with this guy and his wife, and they have become to be one of the most influential people in my life. I've admired, they don't even know this, but I have admired them. And one of the reasons why I've admired them, I love the way they live. I love the way they love. I love the way they put the kingdom of God first. I love they run successful businesses, but they're one of the most generous people I know, that when they see a need, they just give towards it. They don't have to figure out how they could do it. They just do it because they live a life where they have extra so they can do that kind of thing, and God has blessed them. And I've said, man, I want to be like him. I want to be in that place where when I see a need, I don't have to go, hey, Darlene, how could we do this? So anyway, a couple years ago, they took us down to a conference down in Fort Lauderdale called One Hope. One Hope is a ministry that is their goal is that every child on earth would hear the message of Jesus. And they're actively, they have you've heard of the YouVersion Bible app? Anybody have that on their phone? They also have the children's Bible app. The Bible app for children has been downloaded in every country in the world. So right now, they are distributing Bible materials to every country, including North Korea, in the whole world. And they believe that by the year 2030, they will reach every child in the world. And so we went down to their conference. We went down there again this year. And at the end of the conference, they were receiving an offering to do what they want to do. And Darlene and I prayed about this, and we decided that we were going to step out and do something that we couldn't possibly do on our own. And we agreed to an amount that we were going to make a pledge and say, this year, we're going to do this. And we gave specifically towards something. They are developing materials to help people, the church, deal with mental health issues in teenagers in the United States, which is a big problem. And actually, I just want to speak here for a moment. I believe that the mental health issues are the areas that the church is going to have to step up in the future of the church. Because I see it as the biggest need in our culture right now. Because mental health issues, mental health issues have worked their way. A lot of our problems, homelessness, school shootings, they all have mental health touches those things. And the church has been really quiet about it. And I believe if the church really wants to step up and lead the way in culture, we're going to have to lead the way with mental health issues. Now, I don't have a lot of knowledge with mental health, so what we decided to do is instead, let's fund somebody who's creating materials for churches to be able to tackle mental health issues. So we decided that we were going to do this pledge. We didn't have the money, but we said by the end of the year, we're going to believe you, God. We're going to step out in faith, and as it comes, we're going to give it. Now, fast forward this summer through some circumstances in life, and I'm looking at this family, and I want to be like them. We decided to sell our house, the house that we lived in for 15 years. Our kids were raised there. It was on the water. I loved it. That's why it was so expensive. And we decided to sell it and downsize. And it was hard. I cried the day we moved out of there. And we decided to downsize, and we moved into a 572 square foot house. From 3,000 to 572, one bedroom. That way my kids can't come home anymore. And we downsized. And I just want to be honest with you, in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks we've been living there, I haven't really missed the other house. And one of the reasons is because of the weight that's off. We have margin now. We're saving money. We're putting money towards a down payment of a house eventually, but we're also getting out of debt faster than you can imagine. And we've been able to give, because we have margin, we've been able to give. When Hurricane Dorian happened, we didn't have to go. We said, let's do something, write a check. The legacy offering, which we're doing today. We do a legacy offering twice a year, once in February, once now, to accomplish the initiatives that we want to accomplish as a church. We've already written our check. We know what it is, and we were able to do that. And so I love it. Now, here's how God, and this is why I'm telling you this, because I don't want you to think that I'm exempt, that I don't just stand up here and tell you how to live your life and run your life, and I'm not, and this is how God does it to me. While I'm writing this message on greed, I get a letter on Tuesday from our escrow company, our closing company, that says, hey, guess what? You have an extra amount of money left over in escrow, and here's a check for that. It was an unexpected check. And the first thing that I said in my heart, yes, God is blessing us, because we've been seeing this kind of stuff. Now that we have margin, I'm like, yeah, now we can put that towards the house. The next letter we open up was from One Hope, reminding us of our pledge, and it was the same exact amount that I was receiving from my escrow company. And that's exactly what I thought. No, this is to go to our house. And I'm telling you this because I deal with the same thing. I was like, no, this is to go to my house. And then I just felt like I heard God say, you told me that if you prayed and said that if I brought it, you'd give it. I brought it. If you didn't give that, I thought, you know what? That's stealing. And I said, okay, you're right, God. I'm gonna give it. We're gonna give it. I was waiting to see if she said anything. I was like, well, let me just check with God. Okay, God, I'll see if that's you by if Darlene says anything. Yeah, he did. Darlene's like, hey, remember? I know the One Hope thing. I know. Yeah, and I had to do it. Now, you may not think that's greed, but that's here I am writing this message. And I go, that's greed in my heart. And you might even think, Eric, that's foolish to give that away. You need it for your house. That's not wise. You need to be setting that aside for your house. Well, first of all, we made money off the house. We have that set aside. This was unexpected money. But I also knew that if I didn't do this, look, I'm a greedy person by nature. My first inclination was to keep that money. But I want to defeat the boss of greed, and I knew that I had to give this. And I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to convince you to give today or guilt you or anything, but I'm here to tell you this because if you've ever felt that thing, and it feels like a twisting in your gut, when you know this is the right thing to do, but you don't want to do it, when you know you're supposed to give, but you want to keep it, it's not a financial issue. It's a heart issue. I want to make sure we get this before we move on because there's all types of greed, and living your life as if the acquisition of stuff is equal to the quality of life, that's greed. And isn't it amazing the difference between our attitude towards giving and our attitude towards purchasing things, towards spending? Because we will spend money that we don't have for things that we don't need, but then when it comes to giving, we're dictated by what we have in our bank account. And we'll go, well, I don't have it. And God says, well, geez, you sure have enough to buy things that you don't need, that you don't have. What is that? It's a type of greed. I can't give $400, but I could give 1,000. I mean, 100, sorry. I can't give $400, but I could put $1,000 on a credit card. I can't give $1,000 to this need, but I could figure out how to finance $10,000. What is that? Jesus says it's a type of greed. It's not a financial issue, it's a heart issue. Now, we're about 25 minutes into this message. How are you feeling about yourself? Let's try to fix that. I did this on purpose. That's the way to do it. You're like, oh, I suck, man. Is there any hope for me? Well, there's a passage of Scripture that can be very liberating where Jesus gives us practical steps. And they have to be practical steps because, listen, there's no magic prayer for generosity. If I said, hey, at the end of service, we're going to have a prayer, and you come up here, and we'll lay hands on you, and you'll be generous, almost every one of us would do that, or we'd send our wife or husband up here to do that, right? We'd do it, but there's no way to do that. It'd be like me saying, hey, we're going to have a prayer at the end of the service so that you can be in shape. I'd do that, but it doesn't work. The way you get in shape is you make tough decisions to do things and to put into action that's going to create change. And it's the same thing when it comes to greed. You have to make some hard decisions like I did. Now, I'm not, again, it's not because I'm great. I just want to let you know that I feel what you feel. Here's what Jesus said. In Matthew chapter 6, he said, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy. I hate vermin. And where thieves break in and steal. Now, he's not saying that you can't have a savings account. He's not saying that you shouldn't be able to save money for your kids' college, okay? You should. The Bible actually talks about the wisdom of saving money. But he says, but store up for yourselves, verse 20, treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. Okay. So he says, store up, instead of storing up things here on the earth, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Well, how do you do that? Last time I checked, there was not a drive-through bank account where I could deposit money that would go to an account in heaven. So when I got there one day, they go, well, you have $200,000 for your mansion here, okay? So how do you do that? Before I read the next verse, I want to go back to where Jesus said to be careful about all kinds of greed, because he tells us how to store up treasure in heaven. Go back to Luke. It says, here's what he says: sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes and no moth destroys, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So Jesus says, when it comes to storing treasure in heaven, here's what I want you to do, is I want you to liquidate some of the stuff that's in your kingdom, some of the stuff that's in your economy, and I want you to shift it to someone else's economy. In fact, I want you to think about, how can I take stuff out of my little realm, out of my little kingdom, and put it in someone else's? And Jesus says, if you do that, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be storing up for yourself treasures in heaven. So in other words, don't be a hoarder or be a storer. He says that's greed. And then he gives us the reason why, and it's a very powerful principle. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what he's saying is, I want you to reallocate your treasure, because you're going to leave it somewhere, all right? You're going to leave your treasure somewhere. So I want you to take your treasure. Okay, hold on. Let me get this heart back up here again. He says, I want you to reallocate. When it comes to storing your treasure, I want you to shift it into someone else's account. And I want you to reallocate your treasure, because there's a connection that you're not aware of. And the connection is this, that wherever this goes, this is what Jesus says, where your treasure goes, your heart will follow. Wherever you send this will follow you. So if I want to know where my heart is, I follow my treasure. A few years back, I think it was about 15 years ago, I kind of got into amateur stock trading. Sorry, smokers laugh. Which I laugh because I know nothing about stocks. I decided that I was going to get on stock trading, and I bought some stock in Sirius satellite radio. And every day, a couple times a day, my heart was connected to that stock. I was checking it all the time to see if I was making money. And every time there was a dip, I go, I'd freak out. Why? Because my heart follows my money. Jesus says the reason why I want you to sell stuff and give it away, it's not because I don't want you to have anything, but it tells you where this is. It says, I want you to make a conscious decision to send your money somewhere else. And it's just a matter of time before your heart follows. Because God says, I'm not interested in your money, because you're going to leave it here anyway. And God says, you know what? If I wanted your money, I could just take it. What I'm interested in is your heart. And I know that where you send this, your heart follows you. Where you send your treasure, your heart follows. And the way you fire the boss of greed is to buck up and decide that the endless acquisition of things that's not how you're going to live your life. It begins by sending these outside of your own kingdom. It begins by saying, before I fund my own stuff, I'm going to fund somebody else's kingdom. And the ramifications are this, that your possessions have the potential to not only clean out your heart, but to direct your heart. In other words, if you don't like where your heart is, then redirect this. And if you redirect this, then your heart will follow. Now, it looks like he changes the subject, but I want to read this very powerful. It's kind of confusing. In fact, maybe some of you have read this verse and you're like, what does that really mean? Look what he says in verse 22. It says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. That becomes real clear, right? What does that mean? Here's a better way to understand this. What do they call those things on the front of a car that illuminate where you're going? But not what they call them in America. What do they call them in British countries? In America, we call them headlights. What do they call them in British countries? Headlamps. In Australia, Britain, they call them headlamps. See, when we think of a lamp, we think of the lamp that's sitting on the table, But in Australia, they call flashlights lamps, all right? So just when you're driving the car, the headlights direct where the car is going. When you turn the car, the headlights turn, and the car follows, right? Look at it like that. He says, for where your headlamp is, the eye is the lamp of the body, the headlights of the body. So your eye shows the direction of where you're going. If you've ever been involved in sports like surfing or skateboarding or snow skiing, you look to where you want to go next. This is what Jesus is saying, that the eye is the lamp or the headlights of the body. And he's saying that your heart has the potential to direct let me put it this way. You have the potential to direct where your heart goes, okay? And it's an indicator of where your heart is. And here's why I say that. He says, the eye is a lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, what does that mean? This Greek word, the only time they translated this Greek word into the word healthy is in the Bible. All other Greek literature has this word translated as generous. So now look at this. The eye is the headlight of the body. If your eyes are generous, your whole body will be full of light. And then he goes on to say, if your eyes are unhealthy, and that word is actually translated stingy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, if your whole life is looking at things and going, I want that boat, I want that house in Kelly Plain, I want that house here, I want that car, I want that new iPhone 11, I want. Jesus says what you're looking at is you're bringing darkness into your heart. In other words, your heart is now full of darkness. And says this subtle form of greed has the potential to not only affect your finances, it has the potential to affect even your relationships. It does. When I deal with marriages that are on the rocks, there's two main problems. Either relationships, in other words, somebody's looking at somebody else, and now they're having relational problems, or finances. Because finances bring such a stress onto a relationship that they begin to argue about it. Think about this. This little green piece of paper with pictures of dead presidents have the potential to mess up your marriage relationship. Isn't that crazy? Jesus says if all you look at is about what's next and what can I acquire, what you're doing is you're making your heart full of darkness. See, if people feel like they're competing with your stuff, then greed is the issue. So what do you need to do? You need to fire this boss. See, last week we talked about guilt, and we said that guilt couldn't be the boss of us. If you weren't here last week, I encourage you to watch it on our website. Guilt can't be the boss of us because why? If you're a Christ follower, if you put your trust in Jesus, the Bible says you're not your own. So how can guilt be your boss when you can't even be your boss? And we also said that you shouldn't be guilty because Jesus took your guilt. He said that there's no condemnation for those who have become Christ followers because God condemns sin, not you, okay? And so we came up with this great little thing for you to remember. It says, my past will remind me, but it will not define me. And then we told guilt, you're not the boss of me. Well, here's what you need to know about generosity. Generosity is the pink slip that will fire the boss of greed in your heart. When it comes to your possessions, you're going to have to make tough decisions to destroy greed in your heart. And the only way to do it is to make an intentional decision to send some of these in a new direction because your heart will follow. And then you say, greed, you are not the boss of me. My heart follows my treasure, and my treasure belongs to God. And when you do that, generosity, not greed, becomes your boss. Now, here's what happens when I hear a message like this. I go, great, fine, I surrender. 30 minutes, Eric, you talked to me about doing this. Okay, I give up. I'm not going to buy a new iPhone. I'm never going to have a new car. We're going to sell the timeshare. I'm never going to do this again. No, don't do that. That's not the answer. Usually, because that's extreme, and God doesn't live in the extreme. The Holy Spirit, he doesn't live in the extreme. He lives somewhere in the middle, okay? He lives in that tension that we have to manage. Because here's what happens. We get extreme. We go, that's it, fine. And one of two things, this is what happens. Either you go so extreme that your kids don't eat anymore and you don't have a car and you don't have anything new anymore, or it's so extreme that you go, why bother? I can't do that. So why even live that way? And then you just spend a lifetime of consumption. But yet, I was telling about this family that I look up to. I look at them, and we're going to see their story in just a moment. I look at them, and they're successful business people. They are the most generous people I know that when they see a need, they don't even have to pray about it. They just give towards it. And they're quick to give, and they love to finance and fund the kingdom of God. And when I look at their life, and I see how blessed they are, that God just keeps blessing them because they're just giving it away. But yet they have successful business. So somewhere in that, we can manage that tension. And we need to figure out how this lands in our life. So I want you to watch their story. Okay, now it's an 8-minute video, but we cut it down to 4. But you can watch the whole thing on Facebook. We'll have a link to it. But watch this story of this family that I greatly admire and see what you think.
I'm Captain Steve Wilson. This is my wife, Wendy Wilson, and this is our story. And our story is about dreams that come true. I've been told once that those that see God in a big way have big dreams. Those that tend to see God in a small way have smaller dreams. We've always seen God in a big and amazing way. And Matthew 25 came to mind with the story of the talents. We feel that God gave us the Southern Star as a talent, and we want to take that and invest it into His kingdom. Our first year in business was an amazing struggle. We thought we brought the boat here, we would bring the boat here into instant customers, instant success. Didn't quite happen that way, did it, honey?
No, it didn't. Well, the following season, we made it through, and we were coming up, in the business world, so to speak. And in October '95, Hurricane Opal hit Destin, and it decimated Destin. It tore the docks out. It literally put people out of business. When we came back into town, we went to see the boat, and another boat had broke loose, pulled it off its moorings, pushed it up on a hill, and I just went to my knees and I went, oh God, no.
Second trial came sometime later in a fire. We were awakened early one morning by our mate with the word that, did you know the shipyard burned down last night? So Wendy and I threw our clothes on, we're racing across Mid-Bay Bridge. The boat is on the railway system at the boatyard. Wendy says, Stephen, what about the boat? Wendy, it's been dry as a bone. We've had no rain. The wind was out of the north last night. It would put the fire and the heat down on top of us. Boatyard fires are very hot fires because of your paints, your chemicals. It's in a wooden structure. I think the boat's okay. And she said, well, after telling me that, why are you saying the boat's okay? I said, because we're in covenant with our Lord. It's His boat. He provided that boat. And I think He's pleased at what we're doing. And sure enough, when we arrived at the boatyard, there's nothing left standing but the Southern Star. And she was just sitting there in all her majesty, everything else in ashes. And it was truly a miracle. Well, God poured favor onto the Southern Star and our business. And the business grew, our market share grew. We outgrew our 75 passenger boat and decided maybe it was time to buy another one. Took delivery of that vessel 2001.
The Buccaneer is a one-of-a-kind vessel, not another themed tour boat like this, to my knowledge, anywhere in the world. This boat was designed by us in-house, yours truly, and custom built for us in Viola Battery, Alabama.
We got it in July, and we've already served over 17,000 people.
He just provides, He finds a way, and that's the beautiful thing about the relationship. My friend said, you should never do that. You're in a place where you don't have to take that risk. Why would you put everything you own at risk again? And we just felt that it was the right thing to do. And again, it was just based on the scripture out of Matthew 25, to take what He's given us, not bury it, but to invest it. He's brought us to this place at our age, this circle of influence that we have for a time such as this. And it's for Him. So we're just trying to be obedient and do what He's asked us to do.
It was really hard for them to let me use this video because people who are generous, they don't like to talk about it because that's not why they do it. And I would really love to have him pray for me because he's the one that I've looked up to and said, I want to live a life like that. But that doesn't work. You have to step out and decide to do something. And I really feel like I'm on that path now. And I see what it's happening to my life, and I so want that for you. But you're going to have to make the practical decisions to do that. And I'm going to tell you, because I just walked this, and I'm still walking it, it's going to be tough at first. But what I'm discovering is that once you make the leap over there, it becomes so liberating and so free. And so I want to give you just 3 real quick, because then we're going to go into our legacy offering, and Graham's going to come up here. But I'm going to give you 3 quick steps that if you're not living this way, these are the practical steps that you have to do. The first one is a percentage. You have to become a percentage giver. You have to decide to give away a percentage of your income. Because what it'll do is it'll put a lid on your lifestyle. Because what happens is, here's our income and here's our lifestyle, and they're busting up against it, right? And there's no margin. And what you do is you put a lid on this and you bring margin. So, and the way you do that is give a percentage away. You say, before I fund my kingdom, before I fund my lifestyle, I'm going to take a little bit of those Benjamins out, and I'm going to take them out of my realm, and I'm going to put them in someone else's kingdom. Second thing you have to do is you have to make it a priority. It needs to be the first thing you do. I mean, we've been doing this for 30-something years, and we go back to the days you wrote checks for your bills, and it was the first check we wrote. We decided to do that. Now everything's reoccurring. They take it out of your account, and we do reoccurring giving, but we still like to think that, the very first thing we do is we give. Now, you may think, well, as long as you're giving, why does it have to be the first thing? It just depends on you. Whether you really want to kill the boss of greed, then you make it the first thing, because what you do first is most important. And what you're telling the boss of greed is, you're not the boss of me. God is more important. The first check I write is to this. And the last one is this. Progressively, as your income rises, progressively raise the percentage that you give. And what that means is, when you get a raise this year, say you get a 6% income, what most of us do is we go, say you make $1,000 a week, that's $60 extra. Now that's a $250 payment. I can get a boat. And we raise our lifestyle. Or we try to catch up with our lifestyle because we've already got the boat. What you do is you get with your spouse or whoever and you agree, with this 6% raise, we're going to take 1%, 2%, or 3% of it, we're going to apply it to our giving. And that way, you are not chasing after the consumption. You're not allowing greed to be your boss. Now, if those of you who aren't doing this, just start. Just start with a percentage and make it realistic, but yet a challenge. In other words, don't go, we're going to do a 0.5%. Make it a challenge. Make it, okay, we will have to cut back on Starbucks. We will have to do this, but we're going to make a percentage of it. And do it, and so if you're not doing this, then start somewhere. Now, some of you, you're like me. We've been living off 90% or less for 30-something years. We're used to this. Maybe you need a challenge like what we took with One Hope, where we go, God, we're going to believe that you're going to bless us so that we can provide for this, that we can sow into an area that we so love, because mental health issues for us and teenagers is very important to us. So we're going to help fund that. Now, so here's what I hear a lot of people do. Well, God, if you let me win the lottery, then I'll tithe. Or God, if you'll bless me with this bonus, then I can give that $5,000 or $10,000. Well, let me just ask you, what kind of an investment are you to God if that's your thinking? Are you a good investment? If he's got to bring you $50,000 for you to give $5,000? Because I think God would be going, look, I'd rather find someone who will actually step out and trust me for the $5,000 that I can trust with the $5,000. And when I find that person, God says, they'll be responsible with little, they'll be responsible with more. Now, here's the hard part. If this scares you, you're greedy. If this is making you mad, you're greedy. Now, I know what you think. You say, Eric, you're the preacher. Of course you have to say this. Well, here's what I say. Look, if you don't trust what we're saying, if you don't trust me, if you don't trust this, then give somewhere else. It's not what we want from you, it's what we want for you. And so I would even challenge you, then if you don't trust this ministry, then go give somewhere else and see if this works in your life, because it works. Now, do I believe this is a great ministry to give to? Absolutely. Do I believe the legacy offering that we're receiving today is awesome soil to put your finances in? I do. Because not only is it an opportunity for you to fire greed, because again, to counteract greed, it's generosity. Generosity is the silver bullet. It's not prayer, it's the silver bullet that will kill greed. Because remember what we said before, emotion determines your emotion, that when you do something, it'll determine what you feel. So could you imagine what would happen if 1,000 people in this church, every man, woman, and child got a hold of this in our church? It would transform our community. These are the ingredients to change the world. And I'm really speaking to those of you who are in my generation, because guess what? We're the ones with the resources. You 25-year-olds, unless you're some .com person, you don't have the resources, you have the energy. But it's my generation. We're the ones that are resources. We're the ones that are trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to leave our finances to this next generation. And so we have a responsibility to do this, and it changes the way, we have to change the way we think, because when we do it, it changes our heart. And then imagine the power if we teach this next generation to do that. Because this offering is more, and it's more than just putting a roof on this building. It's more than just acquiring some extra buildings because we're growing. Because the truth is, 2.5 years into this church, it's already too small for us. So I see one day we may own all those buildings, not because we want to build an empire, but because we want to impact the community. I may not even be here when we own this whole property. I don't know. But all I know is that where God wants to go is more than just a facility. In fact, I believe God wants the church, and I'm talking about all the churches in Destin, to meet all the needs. Could you imagine the church meeting every need in our community? Not just physical needs and financial needs like with homeless people or whatever, but I mean needs for leadership, quality leadership in our cities. What if in a generation, every city council and every county commissioner and every state government had people from one of the churches in Destin represented there? What if our young people learned to model leadership and generosity? What if God did use us to change mental health in our community? It starts with where we send these. And today you have a challenge before you. You can move some of these into the kingdom of God, and it will move your heart in that direction. And hopefully it will be something that becomes a lifestyle, like Graham talked about. It's not just because we have a hurricane, it's just because we live this way.